and justice for all.
Father Morrison and Steve Schrade from the Episcopal Church will speak tonight on the restoration project in their Duanesburg.
Next slide. Good evening. I'm Steve Schrade, and yes, here I am. And this is the church that James Duane built, as I think you all know. So we won't talk a lot about James Duane. We'll do a little bit of a quick overview of him and his family, but Dave Vincent has already done that, so we won't cover that territory. This is about how the church has been preserved in its almost original state, but with a few changes, and how right now it's deteriorated due to weather and just plain old age. Okay. There's James Duane, 1733 to 97, founder of Duanesburg. We all know that. Duane acquired 40,000 acres here in Duanesburg through inheritance from his father of land, and then simply purchasing land. He married Mary Livingston. He was very close with the Livingston family, and they were land barons, landowners too, down along the Hudson. At that time, it was quite popular for well-to-do men, especially from New York City, to own a manor in upstate. That's what James Duane wanted to do, and Mary Livingston was his wife. James Duane, as I think you know, never lived in Duanesburg. He had a house in Schenectady, spent a lot of time in New York City, but he started the foundation to his home here in Duanesburg, which still exists, and again, as we've said in other presentations, there's some remnants there you can see. He was a member of the Continental Congress from New York, and first mayor of New York City. He has been referred to as one of the minor founding fathers. Not a real big deal, but a pretty big deal in the Revolutionary War. First mayor of New York City. Christ Church has 3 historical markers, which is unusual for any sort of either dwelling or public structure. Going north, as Dave mentioned a few weeks ago, married into the Duane family, married Duane's daughter, and there he is. Built in 1792 at the center of what was considered to be the town square. James Duane, of course, hoped that Duanesburg would become the capital of New York State. Kind of fell short of that goal. And a glebe of 80 acres presented by James Duane for the rectory. That was the farm for the priest to live. Church in the Wildwood it's a pamphlet that was published in 1942.
I think 3.
Written by George
Duane
Featherston.
Yeah.
And it contains an overview of the history of the church and its construction. Here is probably the best photo that I've seen, which shows the church in the, I can't say quite original condition, but in good condition in its most authentic exterior shape. The shutters are one-piece shutters. They either have them on or you take them off, and they were on the church, I presume, for a couple hundred years, and you can see the little, whoops, that's not what I want. Top one. The
Horse block.
that was the step stool for when people got out of their carriages. This was taken probably in the late 20s or early 30s, and you can see that some people, at least in the 20s, I believe, were still perhaps riding in carriages. There's no sidewalk going up. And I remember as a child, those shutters were still on the church, and it was a kind of a dark and gloomy place. And well, that changed, and we'll get to that. Another view of the structure and the carriage, part of the carriage sheds. Here we have I'll say the first alteration or addition to the church. That was the bell tower. The original church did not have that bell tower. Oops, excuse me. It's an addition. If you go into the bell tower, you can still see the original siding. It still exists inside there. It was built in 1811. This little passageway into the church was constructed. It's hard to explain why that was the way it was, but if you go into the church sometime, you'll see why the pews, the rows of box pews, are right along that eastern wall, and they had to figure out a way for the priest who uses that door to go into what's called the sacristy. The priest had to go in here, put on his garments, and then exit the tower, and then go in and conduct the service. Here, we're going to go through a series of pictures taken in the 1930s. I'm going to explain that. Alistair?
These are actually, we find these in the Library of Congress. I think during the Depression, architects were given the job of going around and measuring churches, public buildings, and taking photographs. So we have these wonderful photographs of the building. And we may go back and forward to let you see some of the things that have happened. The first thing to note here is the heating system. That's what it looks like today. Heating system is different. The pulpit is bang in the center of the church, and unusual for an Episcopal church, and I'll come to that later. Oh, sorry, I'm doing the same as you. The organ in the corner, the organ is still in that corner. This one in this photograph, it has been turned to 45 degrees, so you can actually face the organ, but when you look at it today, we've tucked it into the corner. But basically everything is the same. The wine glass pulpit is the same. And the Palladian window at the back, and I didn't notice until I looked today, I think there are blinds on this. This is the Palladian window. There's something covering up that window because you can't see through it. It's unusual also to have a large window behind a pulpit. Maybe it was so they could be blinded by the light. And that is it today. So you can see through the window. That is the window from the outside. It is a beautiful window. Palladian was a style of architecture in Italy, way, way back. And I think this is one of the wonderful features of this building. That is it today. It needs a little bit of tender, loving care. Box pews, if any of you, I'm sure most of you have been in Christ Church, and most of you will know the box pews. Wonderful for keeping children at bay from running around everywhere. But anyway, they would have been rented. People would have, that was how they received their money. They rented the pews, and their name would have been on it. I think some people think that still applies. Sorry, Bart. And this is a photograph today. So really, you walk into here, you're walking into a wonderful historic building. Steve, do you want to talk about the soapstones?
Soapstones were used, as I think most of you know, they were heated next to your wood or coal stoves, brought in so the ladies could put their feet on the soapstones and keep their feet warm during the probably extra long sermon. The stoves, I'll skip ahead, well, not skip ahead, but I too, and I know Bart does, of course, remember the stoves when they were situated in the back of the church, and they were, there's no guard around them. And I remember as a child, my father held my hand very tightly as we inched along to come in during the winter. It was customary, from what I've read in the minutes, that often the services were not held in the church from, let's say, January through March, because it was just too hard for the sexton to get any warmth in the church. So there was the chapel in Duanesburg, which I think many of you know about, which was next to the school, and the school had bought it and used it for a business office. But that was an Episcopal chapel, and during the winter, services were held there at times during the years before central heating.
Maybe one more, because it shows it today.
No stoves.
Yep. There is a crypt under the church, and how many bodies are in it, they reckon?
Over many are blacks.
Okay.
6 at least.
6 at least. This is the way in. You have to lift up this floor to get in. There is a piece of the pew missing, and we have removed that so that people who are wheelchair or who have access getting into the pews can use this. We have kept the piece of pew upstairs, wrapped it up. If anybody wants to put it back, they can. But this is the way into the crypt. And the tablets are the memorials on the walls in the church. This one is to James Duane, and that's it today. Outside we have the carriage shed, and if you count carefully, there are 9 bays. We believe originally there were 12, but these 3 at the end are not in really good condition, and today there are only 6 left. So people use them for their carriage cars. We hope they don't hit the column in the middle. But it still is a wonderful setting, having the carriage shed and the church. It is a set piece, and architects are very interested in set pieces for historic reasons. Do you want to talk about the bell?
Yes. In 1879, lightning struck the tower, the bell tower, and the extent of the damage is not recorded, but with the 200th or the 100th anniversary, the centennial anniversary coming up in 1893, there was an effort through the decades of the 1880s to rebuild the spire on top of the tower and to have a new bell cast. And the tower was repaired and perhaps you could say rebuilt in a Victorian style with a very high pointed spire, and it's only my guess that that's not the way the original tower spire was constructed, because originally it was constructed as a very simple country New England style church. So at any rate, the way it looks now is the way it was reconstructed by 1893. The new bell was purchased from the Manili Bell Foundry in West Troy, which is now Waterville. The bell was transported by rail to the Duanes station up, everybody knows where that was? No, it's Route 7, heading from Duanesburg to Quaker Street as you go up the hill and cross the old tracks off to the left, near
Before Weaver Road.
Fiddler's Farm.
Weaver Road.
Weaver Road, off to the left, there was a train station. So the bell was brought to the train station, Duanes station, and either by wagon or by sled, dragged up to or wheeled up to the church and installed in time for the centennial service.
Next one's yours.
Okay.
These are additions.
Okay. This, wrong again. This is the furnace room, which is not historical by any means, but that was constructed in the mid-50s so that the wood stoves could be taken out. The wood stoves were stored just temporarily, of course, in the carriage shed, but they disappeared one by one shortly thereafter. There are too many stories like that occur, and so that's kind of painful. But an oil furnace, oil burner was installed. Ducts were installed underneath the floor of the church in the crawl space. There's a crypt, yes, but the majority of the space under the church is only about 3, maybe 4 feet high at the most. And we recently had new ductwork installed. I say recently, it was 4 or 5 years ago, and we asked Peterson Oil if they would do it, but they said they didn't have any workers that would fit under the church. None of them wanted to crawl under there anyway. So Jimmy Bridenstine found a smaller serviceman who was willing to do it, and so new ductwork was installed. I think, and again, I'm not an architect or an engineer, But it seems as though once central heating was installed at the church and insulation was installed also, or put in the walls and in the ceiling, moisture problems occurred. And that is one of the, I keep doing that, that's one of the reasons why we think why the church has deteriorated a little faster than it did over the first 150 years, let's say. And let's see. Here's an addition to the church that has been very helpful. It was a ramp installed in about 1996 or thereabouts, and Bart told me this afternoon that the Bishop of Albany wanted to put a roof over this section, install a roof right there, but the congregation, the vestry, said we couldn't do that because that would spoil the front view of the church. So the ramp starts over by the carriage shed, goes up. Putting the ramp in was for the congregation a long conversation. It was debated for many years. There were a lot of different ideas proposed. This turned out to be the most acceptable way for people who are somewhat disabled or just getting old, like I am, to walk. It's easier to walk up that ramp than to walk up the front walk.
Next photograph is the steps.
That was installed in the early 60s by Herb Tabor. I can remember as a boy he was working on that, and you can see how it's settled, and it's not just unsightly, but it's not safe any longer, really. Here we are back into the interior.
The electrics. That's
Ah.
why you show the electrics.
Okay. Another upgrade was the electrification of what had been oil or kerosene lamps. Those are, I believe, and along the side also, the original lamps that had been used. A guy named Ed Scribner, who you might have heard about from Schrade.
Charles Scribner. Who's Charles?
Charles,
That
I'm
was
sorry.
Ed's brother.
Okay. Charles Scribner. Thanks, Bert.
That's right.
Did the job for, was it $60?
$65.
Yeah.
1940.
Disasters avoided. Sometime in the early part of the 20th century, an asbestos roof was put on the church. And that turned out to be a smart move, because in 1974,
March 14th.
Bart remembers that, because I think you left work.
I left.
To
My principal
fight the
let me leave to fight the fire.
It was over on Malcolm Wilbur's farm. His hay barn caught on fire. It was a windy day, and embers were floating across in the wind and landing on the roof. By 10 years later, the asbestos roof was gone, and Cedar Shakes had replaced it because they were authentic. but the barn's gone also, so we're probably safe. It won't burn again. Right. And in 1978, Christmas Eve, snowy Christmas Eve, midnight service, which would start at 11. It was about partway through the service, and someone noticed that there was a smoky smell coming through the church, and a couple of men got out of their pews. One of them, I think, took a fire extinguisher, and Bart, you can tell it a little better than I.
Judge Robert Butler was not, I don't know if he was judge then. Anyway, he was on the vestry, and he said, what should we do? I said, you go out and check the furnace room and throw snow on it, and I will get the extinguisher and meet you at the seat of the fire. Well, he went out, and I tried to get this 30-pound ABC extinguisher from the front of the church out the back without people noticing. Well, of course, that was doomed to failure, because I'd gotten about not far past the organ, headed rearward, when some woman's voice said, "Fire!" like that, you know. And the priest who was doing the consecration of the host and everything turned around and he said, "Bob, should we be doing something?" he was from Rhode Island, and I don't know, somewhere New England. I said, "No, Father, just continue. We'll take care of it." He said, "All right then." So he continued, and Bob came back and said, "The fire is out." And we thought, now there is an irrefutable example of providence, because what would be the likelihood of 11:30 on a Christmas Eve in a bad snowstorm? The place is full of people. You know, you can doubt, but man, that's hard to deal with. Both of those, 74 and 78, I think God intervened and saved us. Never mind. Back to you, Steve.
All right, so those were the close calls that we were referring to here. There was a restoration project in the 1980s. You can see that the floor was in the church was ripped up. You can see the crawl space. At that point, those were the new. I think new pipes were being installed then, and there were some of the volunteer workers. This is their supervisor. He was from the Summit Correctional Facility. But those boys, they did good work, and they've closed down the Summit facility, which is too bad, because I think it was helpful for us, and it was helpful for the boys. There's the Palladian window being worked on. It's going to be worked on again. The plaster in the 70s was coming off the walls and off the ceilings. Here you may remember when you saw the picture of the stovepipes, they went into a step chimney, which would start somewhere here and go up through the roof. It was determined that the step chimneys no longer were needed, since we weren't burning wood anymore. So they were torn out, and the corners, the northeast and northwest corners, were reconstructed and replastered. Anybody know who that is besides Bart? Paul Pants. Remember Paul? Paul Panis. Yeah. Paul worked very hard on that restoration. He was the guy that installed the lath for the plaster. And there was a steeple restoration in 2005. And we'll see somebody that you might know. Joe Murley. He restored the finial, the weather vane, and yeah. Joe did nice work. Take it over.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not the original weather vane on the roof.
No, because that's part of the talk.
The original weather vane is not on the roof.
Okay.
It's stored somewhere. Joe made no one.
Oh, did it? Right. That's interesting. Thank you. I came over to the United States 7 years ago, and I came over here to marry Mother Laurie, who is the priest in St. John's in Johnstown. It's a long story, but I came over here. I have no accent. You all have an accent. I will continue to use my accent and talk slowly. I was called to Christ Church in 2017, was it? Yes. And Steve said to me, "Oh, by the way, we're celebrating our 225th anniversary. What are you going to do?" We had a series of events. We had the bishop there. But one of the things that I did, because of my background in Belfast in Northern Ireland, was I worked for 20 years in the world of historic buildings, restoring castles, mansions, churches. So I had an idea of what to do with an old building. And I said to the vestry and I said to the committee who were doing the 225th anniversary, we need to have this building looked at by professionals. It is too important to let this building decay any further. So I persuaded them, and they trusted me, thankfully, to do a number of things for the church, but primarily to get a condition report done. Here's one of the things that we did do for the 225th, was we took off the markers and we had them redecorated, we had them repainted. This is it, hung upside down. It's a wonderful picture. And then it was reinstalled. There's a couple of people here who have sadly passed away, but they were very happy to put these signs back up. Back in 2018. This is the report, and I did have it here. We employed historic specialists from Albany, John G. Waite, architects, and in 2021, it took that length of time because COVID hit, and they produced this document for us, explaining what has gone wrong with the building and giving us some ideas of what to do with the building. So this has been a long time coming to get the building restored. In this document, the architect described the building as Christ Church is an important and extremely well preserved example of a simple federal period church architecture in the tradition of New England meeting house. The extent to which it survived its late 18th century form is remarkable. Today, Christ Church stands as one of the major landmarks of Schenectady County and the greater capital region. The church is well built, and if repaired and maintained appropriately, it will last for centuries and be able to welcome generations of new congregants. That's how important this building is. Ecclesiastically, historically, socially, it is significant. Sadly, I recognised when I came, I thought, why God have you allowed me to come over here to look after another building? But when I saw this building, I said, yes, this building needs looked after. So that's what we did. We got this report done, and I will show you some of the difficulties that we're having with the building. The furnace house, which Steve talks about before, we're going to demolish it because it's built of block and water just runs right into it. Up in the steeple, you've got some of the joints that are coming apart, which are not visible from below. By the way, I love it whenever you restore a building and people say to you, "What did you do?" Because you restored it to its original beauty, but people will go, "You spent all this money and it just looks exactly the same." What did you do? But that was the goal of restoration, and it was to restore it as it was. But these are things that you'll not necessarily see driving past. Some of the columns that hold up the bell, some of the actual roof of the steeple, there's decay at the bottom of them. So these are things that we wouldn't normally see whenever you're just coming into the building or walking around. And the roof. This was a very recent roof in the last 15 years.
2011,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it was.
A lot of it, many of them have cupped, and some of them are landing on the ground. So we need the roof redone. Here's the joint between the furnace house and the siding. The detail is not correct. Water just gets in there and soaked up into the wood. And we've seen some of this at the back. The worse this gets, the better for us, because then people say, "We really need to help you." But paint coming off isn't always a difficulty, but if paint starts to peel, water will get in behind it, and then it will start to soak in. The whole secret of a historic building is water can get in, as long as it can get out. Buildings have to breathe. And as Steve said, when you put insulation into the cavity, that stops it from breathing. It holds the water.
How was it put in?
It was blown in. I think it was a lot of beads or fibers.
No,
It was foam.
it was a very early version of foam
It was foam
insulation.
insulation.
It was formaldehyde.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to taking off some of the siding to see if, as it's disintegrated over the years. So there's a lot of things, and as Steve said, part of the modern way of living, we like comforts, we like heat. And when you do that, you then adjust the building or alter a building, and it doesn't behave the way it did when it was originally built. So modern interventions are not always good for historic buildings. The architect in the report said that 70% of the siding is original timber in good condition. It's the new stuff that has decayed. And you can do this with it. You actually now put your finger through it. You don't need a knife. The windows are original. They're wonderful. And if you ever watch someone who's involved in historic buildings, they go into a building and do this. Because you're looking at the windows and you will see the ripples and you will see which ones are original rippled windows. Because float glass is just smooth and you'll just see through it. So a lot of these are the original glass. And they will need to be taken out, carefully stripped back, and then repainted, but also probably reputtied and put back in. And some of the joints of the windows, the sills, are not in good condition, which is expected of a building of this age. Again, the Palladium window, I didn't realise I had so many photographs of this. I must like it. Another problem is the ground level has risen over the years and it is now touching some of the siding. You really need to have a gap between that because it acts like a wick and it will just pull the water up. So we're going to have to do something with the level, and you can see at the corner there's a lot of decay. This photograph was taken 5 years ago. This was taken last year. So we're getting continual decay on the building, and we need to do something. Because water comes here and it just ponds, it just sits there. Steve's already mentioned the steps at the front and the settlement. It's quite a large gap you have to climb up. Out in the carriage shed, we may not be able to afford a complete restoration at this time of the carriage shed. All our resources are probably going to have to go into the church. But the carriage shed is also, it's in reasonable condition. And as long as it's not going to fall over, I would say we're okay for a while. But you can see some of that's the end of a large beam. And you can see some reinforcement has been put in to help it. Again, at the back of the carriage shed, we've got difficulties with siding. So, what we're doing with the help of the architect, we are restoring the building, and I have with me a set of drawings if you're interested to look at them. They're not the complete drawings. They gave these drawings to us as an interim, but you can see the areas in grey are the areas that need to be restored. This is the worst elevation because it's in the north elevation. It's usually the wettest. It also has the hill coming, everything runs down the hill.
Never gets the sun.
And it never sees the sun, yes. So, you can have a look at those drawings. You can see the front is just not so bad, but around the little roof. And I learned a new phrase. I learned stoop. That was a new architectural term for me. I never knew what a stoop was. And somebody asked me, yes, thank you for the translation. Somebody said to me, well, if you don't call it a stoop, what do you call it? External steps.
It's a stoop.
It's a stoop, yes, I know. So, they're really well-detailed drawings, and I was impressed by the quality, having worked in that world for so long. We also employed a fundraising consultant, and Jay helped us a lot in how to gather ourselves and come up with a plan to go out, because the figure that the architect came up with, which was just the construction, actually paying professionals and paying all sorts of other things, because it's not just the building that you're paying for, there's a lot of other things like insurance. We reckoned that it was going to cost $1 million to fix this, to restore it. Jay then came on board and gave us a lot of interesting hints of make sure you've got a lot of money raised before you go public. You know, work on those people that you think are going to be able to give and get momentum before you actually go out to people. So when we went public with this, which was 2 Christmases ago, we had reached $490,000. So this was we felt this was really good to employ someone who gave us so much help and confidence to go forward with this. Currently it stands at over 600,000. So we're continually working on this. We may have to, if we don't raise enough money by next year, we may have to just not do some areas, but we want to do it in one go, because nobody wants to continue to raise money, and nobody wants to continue to give money.
If it's historical, why isn't the state supplying?
Because it's a church.
It's a church.
We've already applied to New York State, and because it's a religious building. There's a group called the New York Conservancy group, and they have given us a generous grant of $49,000. As long as we do one thing, that we open the building one day a year, and we do, to the public. And I'll come to that in a little while. So the fundraising consultant was really helpful, and then we produced some literature. I have some of those that you can take with you, which goes over some of the areas that we have found difficulty with water, mostly to do with moisture. Moisture is coming in underneath, moisture is coming in the side, and moisture is coming out above. We're going to sink. And again, you can see some of the things on this little brochure. We have done some work in between. We felt that the water coming from the hill above was flowing right in to the graveyard. There's a graveyard adjacent. You can see the headstones. And so we dug up the old drainage and laid a new French drain, hoping that would take away a lot of the moisture that's coming into the building. The architect has put moisture meters inside the building, and every so often we take readings from them, and they say, yes, those are interesting, but they don't really tell us what because we haven't done the complete restoration. So they will be a good comparison to see what the moisture levels are inside the building. One inside the crypt. And whenever you put heating into a space under the building, it dries out. So then we've got settlement in the building, and the stonework around the crypt has dried out, the joints fall out. So adding heating isn't always a good thing. It's very comfortable, but it's not always the best thing for a building. So there we had some of the drainage being laid. Once a year, we do an annual historic service. A few Sundays ago, actually Pentecost Sunday, was the New York Landmark Conservancy's Open Sites Day as well. So we opened up to the public, but over the years, more and more people have begun to dress up in the period costume. And it's a fun day, maybe not if you have to sit through the whole service, because it's done in the original 1793 prayer book language, which is Elizabethan. 1789, thank you, Mark. 1789 prayer book. I grew up with it. I grew up in the Church of Ireland, which is a cousin of the Episcopal Church. I grew up with that language. Ye that do truly and earnestly repent you of your sins. It just rolls off for me, but we do that once a year. It's a great service to go to. I also use the pulpit. The rest of the year, we use the reading desk below, and the pulpit I would use once a year for two reasons. One is I keep tripping on the way up. The robes keep tripping. That's a minor one. But also in the church, if you're looking up all the time, and it's a long sermon, nobody wants to do that. The pulpit is up there so you can also see the people sitting in the gallery above. And I'm going to give you a little bit, 2 minutes of ecclesiastical architecture. Architecture speaks to you when you go into a church building. It speaks to you of the theology and understanding of what that church believes. Mm-hmm. You walk into this church, what hits you the first thing you see? It's the pulpit. So the preaching of God's word is the most important thing. Here is the altar or communion table off to the side. If you go into a typical Episcopal church or a Roman Catholic church, what's the first thing you see? Where is the pulpit? To the side. So when you walk into a church, the first thing you see, that's what it wants to tell you. This building was built probably just after the Great Awakenings. Preaching of the word was the important thing, and that's why we have this wonderful pulpit. The thing about it, people kept asking, what is this? That is a soundboard. Soundboard, the preacher voice goes up and then is projected to the rest of the congregation. And we don't need any form of amplification in the building. It's a very intimate space if you've been there, but it really helps to have that above. We also have a new soundboard because we do transmit online, and we have a soundboard here. So 200 years later, we're using another soundboard, which I find interesting. But you can see some of the people all dressed up, and I think you will recognise this character. Thank you, Bart, for dressing up this year. And Bart, after the service, gives people the opportunity to have a few. It's really a tour of the building and the history and the architecture. So thank you, Bart, for doing all that. At the end of this year's historic service, someone came because they were visiting different churches, and he came to the church. Most of us had left. In fact, it was just our Deacon Debbie, who was there, and he was really interested in the building. He had come from the Presbyterian Church in Lansingburg, which is over Troy, and he said, this building, Christ Church, is almost identical to the church that we used to have. And he sent us a photograph. That's Lansingburg Presbyterian Church, built in 1794. Very, very similar. It's a Georgian house. You go in through the front door, and they've put a steeple on the end of it. So it was really interesting that day someone came and said, your building is what our church used to look like. He really enjoyed just being in that building. Their building, I think, was destroyed by fire or whatever. We have been very blessed that this has not been destroyed. It's a unique place, and part of our thinking through the restoration is what are the fire risks. One of the biggest risks is actually the carriage shed. The carriage shed was to catch fire. The furnace house is a big risk. There's no water in the building, and we do use candles, but I sometimes wonder why do we use candles, because that's another fire risk. But we only use them when we're there. Christmas trees can be a risk. We do put an actual Christmas tree in, but we may have to start using artificial because of the fire risk. So there are different ways that we're trying to preserve this wonderful building. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? Don't forget to look at the drawings, and if somebody wants to look at the restoration report, they can. Are there any questions? Is that the way you leave this? Yes, go ahead.
Father Morrison, does the restoration work include anything with the crypt down below?
Not this time.
No.
We're not actually doing anything in the interior at all.
It's all exterior.
It's all exterior. It's all exterior. There was a photograph that I was supposed to take yesterday but didn't do it. We now have a leak coming in, which is wonderful, because then people say, you need to fix this building. As long as it's just one. We did approach the insurance company to see if we could get help with replacing the roof, but I got a letter last week and they said no. That's news for you too. So we're working always to try to raise funds for this building, but it's an exciting project.
Does the insulation stay or does it go?
If it comes out, it comes out. We're not putting new insulation in. So as much as we can get out, I think we will take out.
There's going to be increased ventilation
Yes.
in the attic over the dome.
Yes, that insulation will probably stay, but there's 2 windows that have been blocked up either end of the roof space, so we're going to reopen those so air can flow through.
Was the 1893 bell the first bell in the church?
I don't think so. There's no record of what type of bell was there, but if you go up in the tower to the area above the dome, which is attic space essentially, you can see on the eastern end there's a structure built in there, a platform-like structure that would have housed a built-in tower, a small tower right there on the east end. Likely there was some sort of bell there. But,
the bell at the minute, when you go upstairs to the gallery and you go into where the bell is rung, everybody who's rung the bell has signed the back of the door. Because back, do you know how far back it goes?
No.
Yeah.
Well, 1893.
Yeah, he's in 1893. A few weeks ago, we had a visit from James Duane. He's a descendant of James Duane. He now lives in Germany. For some reason or other, he's been brought up in Germany. He's an American citizen, but 3 months old, his family moved to Germany. But he was over visiting his half-sister, and they came to visit here. So we had James Duane in the building, which was wonderful. Any other questions?
The shutters that were once on the windows?
They're all in the carriage shed. I was going to say if anybody wants them, but no, they're probably part of the restoration. But we don't want it to become dark again. No, it is original fabric. We've got it. That's great. That's good historic philosophy to keep original material. But we don't want to darken the place again. There are no stained glass windows. There's no ornamentation. It's very simple, very plain. Thank you.